I added these little registration lines for all of the teeth, so I know their exact placement on the inside of the roof of the mouth as well as the outside, and that also I the solid black lines with no registration marks where I want the pattern to end. Press X props got me hooked on using a honing rod. You also see these in professional kitchens. This model, especially since it's a 3D print, and I'm not worried about scratching it up, I'm going to be cutting the pattern right off of this. Do a handful of passes on one side. I'm not doing the whole chef thing, not with this. The way some of these pieces work might need some tweaking. I think I did a pretty good job at predicting where I'm going to need darts and where pieces are just going to be too big for the size of the pattern once I scale this up. This nose piece here, I'm going to say that's probably 100 to 120 angle, and then it goes that way pretty much all the way around until it gets to right here. That's pretty much a 90 degree right there, and you can use that as a reference. Probably start with the sharpest angle you can find. Usually 90 degrees is probably the easiest to determine because it's just a corner, it's a square. You can use that as a reference for every other angle on it, especially this one right here. You could make two pieces, or you could just double up the EVA foam and sand this rounded edge on. I'm going to have to go back and look at all this footage to really get a good idea as to what the angles are going to be. And that's also a reason why I numbered the 99% of the parts, because normally you would be like, okay, this seam right here is A and A, and this seam right here is B and B. I think I might run out of letters if I try to do that for every seam, for every piece of the model. Make sure you have whatever you are going to stick your pattern to ready to go, because once these pieces come off and you're ready to lay it down flat, they're pretty much going to be mounted when you take pictures of them to either import them or clean them up or scale them up or whatever you're going to do with them later. I took a piece of masking tape, and I laid it on the inside of this guy's teeth. As you can see, I traced on the inside exactly where the teeth meet the skull. This is going to be something super lightweight in the end when it's done, when it's in completely transferred to EVA foam and cut out. I think it's going to look so cool. Another thing that I'm just noticing now that I probably should have done on the template is this piece right here is where I should have had a seam, and then what I would have done was had this piece overlap. Yeah, but maybe, I don't know. I still haven't transferred the pattern to any kind of digital format, so maybe we'll do that. But now that I have a line traced on the inside, this is going to be, I only need to do this for one half. I don't need to do this for the whole, for both sides, because I can just mirror. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get as close as I can. Everything I make, every template I make, I'm going to be making them keeping in mind that I'm going to be cutting inside the lines. So the line is not going to be included in the dimensions of the final piece. This is where the teeth get a little complicated, because the larger teeth on the side here, not incisors. I guess that means it's a carnivore, so I guess they're all incisors. These ones are facing outward, right? They're flat, and they're consecutively together flat, right? The ones in front, though, the ones that are really meant to like bite into and grab a hold of whatever they're munching on, whatever the T-Rex was eating, they're facing forward, next, like side to side, right? It's only the front, really, when they start to turn inward. I want to say the first 1, 2, 3, 4, the front 8 teeth. I'm gonna have to, I can get the length of them from this, but I can't rely solely on the tracing to get the 3D profile of these teeth. I'm gonna have to measure them after the fact, but I can worry about that after I take this tape off. I'm gonna number these so I know which tooth is which. So now that all the teeth are traced on the back end of this masking tape, I'm gonna pull it off. And boom, we have our T-Rex teeth. Just as is, should be able to just stick it onto a piece of paper. And I used thin enough masking tape so that this would work. And all I gotta do is trace. And then also just continue the lines of each tooth up to where they are supposed to end. When I bring these into Inkscape, I'm going to be referencing the model as I go, so I can appropriately add the right sharpness to each of these, because tracing them, it kind of dulled the tips of the teeth, you know? And while I'm pretty sure T-Rex teeth weren't necessarily the point, wasn't necessarily the dangerous part, it was the serrations on each tooth that allowed each tooth to kind of act like a saw blade. And This guy's mouth was just lined with them like a shark on steroids. So yeah, you can tell that some of the teeth are pointier on the model than how they wound up being traced. I can mess with that once it's in Inkscape. Also noticing that I really didn't get much of the rounded edges of each tooth as they meet the skull, but that's another thing I can fine-tune once I'm making a digital version of the pattern. You could do this, you could avoid completely, you know, if you had something bigger, you could just scan this into your computer, change the settings to black and white, and just scale it up as is. But it's always going to be a little, like especially with the tips of each tooth, it's going to be a little off. And then especially with these need to be redrawn because they're facing completely the opposite way of they're aligned completely differently, the front four teeth. So what I did get out of this tracing though is I got the front profile of each tooth. So these four, I got the width. What I need though is I got the width and I got the length. What I need though is the side profile, just like the sides of these teeth. It looks like the front four teeth, very similar size and shape and curve to this one. The tooth before they start to the angle of them starts to go more inward than outward facing. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this tooth, right? And when I'm making the pattern in Inkscape, I'm just gonna take this tooth and scale it to the length of these ones, and then I'll have essentially the front row of the teeth. I think that's gonna be my best bet, because having them the same width. Just making the template from these as is, it's not going to be accurate. It's going to look weird. It's going to alter the spacing in between each tooth, and then what's going to happen is the teeth on my model are probably going to be pushed back further than they're supposed to be, and I want to avoid that. I did make some reference lines on the template that I pulled off of this already as to where the teeth stop, and where like the joint, you know, where the mandible attaches to the skull, but I want to avoid these being obviously out of proportion. So scale this tooth down for the front. I guess it's technically 8 for the front 8. So it's just going to be this shape, and that should be easy enough. It looks like it's also the same. I want to say not length, width, height. I guess height. Yeah, just scale down 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one. So yeah, it's just this tooth scaled down. So let's call this top teeth, and let's just number them 1 through X, right? So we're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4. We can all count. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 28 teeth for the top row. So now we're just going to do the same thing for the bottom set. Better to have too much than too little. What is this, PLA? Yeah, the printing lines, that's got to be PLA, right? I would totally, this is totally a project for resin, especially with the smaller teeth. The same stuff that I think they recommend you use for like Warhammer 40,000 models. That whatever 3D printer, whatever resin printer they use for those things, oh dude, I would totally use that for this. Because if I wanted to make a silicone mold of this and copy it, like I would have to hit it with primer and sand it over and over and over again, and there's a lot of tiny details that I would totally just end up losing to the primer and sanding process to get rid of the print lines. So this is perfect for my purposes for this, for replicating it by making my own pattern of it and replicating it with a different material, EVA foam. But as an actual like print, nah, I would avoid using PLA. I would use resin or like a high resolution ABS. All right, so I'm gonna mark the spacing. I gotta put my finger behind it to have something to write on. I'm gonna mark the spacing. That's how I know how much more needs to go next to this tooth in the front. And I think I can get away without having to use another tooth as a reference for this front one. I think I can get away with the thickness as is. The other thing I am going to have to note is that some of these teeth are noticeably thicker than the others. So I'm gonna have to make a point to measure each one as I go and include that on the template for these whenever I do that. Plan is to do that today. I'm committing to doing that today, at least. This is the last thing that needs to be drawn analog, and then I'm good to go. I'm good to go finally working on the actual digital template of the skull itself, which will be tedious but fun once it's done. Having a micron this thin, especially for this, is such a lifesaver. If I had to do this with a ballpoint pen like I've done in the past, I think on the prototype for this I used a ballpoint pen, and so the first time I adapted the pattern, the template, the teeth were so much thicker and I had to guesstimate a lot of the detail lines. But this is so much better. I get like the actual depth. Okay, that's the bottom row outside, and just the same thing I did on the upper teeth. I need to get a reference line for where they meet the jaw, just like that. That's it. Got the line on the inside, and we got the trace of each tooth on the outside. So when I'm going into Inkscape, all of these are going to be same for the top row. They're all going to be sharper. They're all going to be pointier, nastier. So just so there's no confusion at all, I'm going to tape this to our paper in the correct orientation off the bat. I almost instinctually put it on the paper upside down, but this keeps it in the frame of mind that this is in fact the bottom row of teeth. I'm just going to trace the lines through the tape. I might go ahead and add some of the sharpness in now, because why not? But this one for sure, this one almost looks like like an elongated shark tooth. Which, I mean, the T-Rex is kind of it's kind of a land shark, isn't it? They just look so much more intimidating on the skull. I just need to remember that these really need to be... They just really need to be tipped. I think that's all. That's all I'm missing, is they just really need to be tipped really well. And I think that'll do it. Just gotta remember he's got kind of a gap in between the bottom two front teeth. Probably be a good whistler. And then same thing, just gonna label them 1, 2, 3, 4. This will obviously be, let's do T for top teeth and B for bottom row, bottom teeth. Now I have to go through the footage, the last 10 minutes of it or so, take screenshots, and yeah. So I think I'm done with the camera for today. Cool.